go ahead and get started. And I am going to attempt here to share my screen so you see a PowerPoint. And then there's also a video of me as well. And I believe someone just, I think, said something. I believe to get that to work correctly, if you click on View Options at the top of your screen, and side by side, I believe is what you need to do. I guess as long as you can see the PowerPoint, if you want to look at me more in depthly, more power to you. I got a lot of moving parts here. I'm trying to manage. I have way too many screens and stuff going on. So please bear with me if I happen to click on the wrong button. But thank you for joining me today. I don't know about where you are, but where I am here in Middle Tennessee, it's an absolutely gorgeous day. Thought about going outside and presenting outside, but I wasn't sure if the Wi-Fi could manage everything here. So I really am. I'm excited and honored to be here today and presenting this webinar to you. I became interested in leadership after participating in a year-long leadership institute almost 15 years ago. And it's always a pleasure for me to talk about leadership with anyone interested. And what we're going to talk about applies to anyone in any kind of library, whether it's academic, K-12, public, a special library, whatever, you name it. And you don't have to be in a formal leadership position to benefit what we're talking about today. It really applies to anybody in any role. If you really want to develop leadership, become a library leader, what we're talking about today will apply to you and help you out. So a little bit about me before we get started. I am the interim dean of the James E. Walker Library at Middle Tennessee State University, and I've researched, published, and presented on leadership and organizational culture. I have many publications on library leadership, and my most recent one is a book titled Library Leadership Your Way. It's published by ALA, and that publication forms the basis for this webinar. So before we begin, I want to give you an overview of the webinar so you'll know what to expect. Now, many presentations and webinars on leadership are prescriptive. And they tell you in order to be a great leader, you must do these three things, or they'll tell you ways to be transformational or ways to be authentic. And the problem with prescriptive approaches is they do not apply to everyone. The steps laid out may not use your strengths, and you might spend a lot of time trying to develop weak areas far beyond the point of being beneficial, while also not using what strengths you have as a leader. And this ends up being very frustrating for you and everyone else involved, and it makes more sense to use your already existing strengths to become a great leader. So the main takeaway from this webinar and the book it's based on is there is no one way to lead. Okay, every library leader has their own leadership style, approach, and practice. And library leaders each have their own way of doing leadership, and they should work to strengthen and build their unique approach instead of trying to follow a strict model of the correct way to lead. And now this webinar, it will ask you to think about your approach to leadership and how you could not only improve that approach, but how you could use your unique approach to become a successful library leader. Now, so Library Leadership Your Way is intended to be a practical guide for anyone who's interested in library leadership. And now the point is not to explain how to lead, but for you to discover why you want to lead, right? How you can best lead, and what your unique leadership practice looks like. Now, as I said earlier, this book, this is based on my book, Library Leadership Your Way. And I've done this as a pre-conference, but never as a webinar. So congratulations, you all get to be a test audience. So I know that that's fun. It's a little extra value thrown in there for free. So In today's webinar, you'll be asked to think about what leadership means to you. Okay, learn overall principles of how to effectively lead yourself and others, and be exposed to major leadership theories and philosophies. And finally, you're going to be asked to think about what a leadership practice and plan would look like for you. And by the end, you'll either be ready to start or to re-energize your leadership life. Now, chances are, if you're attending this webinar, you've thought about leadership, not just you want to become a library leader, but about the big questions like what exactly is leadership and what makes for a good leader. And for this first section of the webinar, we will ask and try to answer the question, what is leadership? Now, this is not an easy question to answer. To some extent, leadership is in the eye of the beholder. One person wants an authoritative leader who makes decisions and commands, while another person wants a leader who takes a consensus-driven, democratic approach to leadership. Now, the world does not lack for definitions of leadership. Now, seemingly every book and article and video and seminar on leadership has its own definition. Defining leadership is important because we cannot measure what we cannot define. And this is one of the weaknesses of the leadership field. The leadership literature, both academic and popular, is filled with definitions of leadership. Now, at times, it seems like every person writing about leadership has their own definition of the concept. There's no agreed upon definition of leadership. And in the most broad sense, definitions of leadership are about influencing followers to achieve organizational goals. But many researchers also define leadership as helping followers reach their fullest potential, creating other leaders, organizational unity and success, and a whole lot more. Now, not only is leadership in the perception of the individual follower, but it's environmental and contextual as well. What kind of leadership a library needs during years of budget cuts is different than what they need during times of budget surplus. Now, one benefit of the variegated definitions of leadership is library leaders are empowered to create their own definitions based on their personal preferences, experiences, and the library in which they work and lead. So what I want to know what you all think about and how you define leadership. So if you take a moment, go to this URL, www.menti.com, menti.com, and enter the code that you see on the screen. That's 614894. And then enter one word that you think best describes leadership. And what's going to happen is I'll leave this up just for a little bit so you can get the information that you need. Is your entries are going to populate a word cloud, and I'll give everyone about 90 seconds, 2 minutes to complete that and enter your terms. And let me just X out of this real quick here. I'll go over onto this here. And so once you start entering your terms, I might have given you the wrong code. I'm sorry. You need to use the code that's up here on the screen. I believe I gave you the wrong code. It's 864768. It's right up here on the screen. You should be able to see it right here. If you enter that code, that's the right one to use. I got my codes mixed up here. So there we go. All right. Now things are starting to come in there. And if you're not familiar with how a word cloud works, the more times a term is put in and used, then the bigger that word appears. And so if you look on this screen, it looks like vision is really big, and that's really important to have that transparency. Just got really big. Another important one, because we think of transparency, we think of honesty and trustworthiness. Okay, um, decisive and courageous are both big up there. Um, Collaboration. I think it's so important also for libraries and library leaders to collaborate in whatever kind of library you happen to be in. You need to build those partnerships, one, to show what it is that you can do as a library, but also to be able to leverage the skill sets that are in your community, whether that's your campus or your community that you're in or the organization that you're in. um, there. So there's some good answers up here. I like these. This is really good. Um, but you see also just how many different kinds of things are up there and how many different kinds of ideas are up there just from this group right here, one word to describe it. And you see we have a lot of words that are up there. So this is one of the challenges in when we think about, well, we want to become a leader, we want to write about leadership, study leadership, go to any kind of seminar or training. You start to see some of the challenges that come up when you think of all of the ideas and all of the various concepts and definitions that there are of leadership. Okay, so this is good. This is a good list of words right here. I like that. Okay, so I'm gonna flip back over here to uh, do. Oops, sorry, I had to took me back to the beginning. Okay, so those were your definitions of leadership, or your one word to describe leadership. I appreciate that. I really like them, and I've developed my own leadership definition, and this is based on a study I did, where I asked participants to describe a library leader who had positively influenced their work lives, and to describe future library leaders who will make a positive impact. What describe them, what there were three words that best describes those people. And out of that came this Martin library leadership definition. Okay, leadership is influencing followers through the creation and managing of organizational meaning, building and maintaining relationships, and the consistent demonstration of professional and managerial competence. So the Martin Library leadership definition has three main parts to it, right? There's the vision, and that's the organizational meaning. You have inter and intrapersonal skills, and then you also just have competence as a librarian, and also competence as a manager, as a leader. Okay. Now, you don't get to take a webinar or a presentation from me without getting some homework. So what I want you to do, and not right now, but this is your homework. This is what you're gonna have to go home and do, is think about and define leadership. So before you can create your leadership style and develop your leadership practice, you have to first define what you mean by leadership. Okay, there's no right or wrong definitions here. Just take some time to think about what leadership means to you. What does it mean to be a leader? What makes a leader successful? How do you define leadership? And at the end, I'll come back and I'll list all of your homework assignments. That is assignments plural. You're gonna have a lot to do. So you can work on developing your leadership practice. Okay. Some of you are already probably regretting doing this because there's homework involved. You're like, that wasn't in the registration form, but here we are. Okay. So leadership, is an important and powerful force in an organization, but it's only one of several forces that make up organizational life. The other forces that operate within and on the organization are followers and organizational culture. Now, followers act on and act out the mission and vision of the organization, and followers perform the frontline work of the organization. And they can either make a leader look golden or thwart and stymie the leader at every turn. And organizational culture is the unique way organizational members see and interact with the world. And culture dictates how and what work is done in an organization, and it dictates not only how leaders and followers act, but who can be a part of the organization. And each one of these parts influences and is influenced by the other two. Now, unfortunately, most leadership books and literature focus only on leadership and ignore the roles of followers and culture play. Now, in this section of the webinar, we're going to explore what I call the leadership followership process. So, the leadership followership process takes into account the three main factors of organizational life. Okay, that's leaders, followers, and organizational culture, and how they impact organizational work and outcomes. Now, these three factors play a specific and meaningful role in a library, and all three influence and are influenced by each other. Leaders are one piece of an organization, albeit a crucial piece. But followers and organizational culture are just as important. Now, leaders create meaning or the vision, and followers interpret and act on that meaning. And organizational culture dictates what meaning is appropriate and the norms and behaviors of library members as they work towards achieving that meaning and that vision. Now, in order for a library to be successful, library leaders must create and manage a library-wide shared vision, build relationships with followers, and be a competent librarian and administrator. Now, followers must be active, accountable, responsible, and competent. And the library's culture must be healthy enough to allow for robust and meaningful interactions between leaders and followers. Now, organizational culture starts with an organization's founders and their values. So, and as more people adopt those cultural values, the culture becomes stronger. Now, those organizational members who, for whatever reason, do not adopt the same values leave the organization. And over time, this creates a strong and homogeneous cultural belief system. As new members are added to the organization, including leaders, they are selected according to how well they meet the cultural norms. And with each new of organizational members, the culture grows even stronger. Now, organizational culture becomes so strong that eventually people will self-select to which organizations they will apply based on culture. Now, organizational culture was best defined by Edgar Schein, who called it a pattern of shared basic assumptions that was learned by a group as it solved its problems of external adaptation and internal integration that has worked well enough to be considered valid and therefore to be taught to new members as the correct way to perceive, think, and feel in relation to those problems. Another way of looking at culture and another way of defining it is it's the way we do things around here. And culture can be understood in the answers to questions like, what does it mean to work here? Now, no matter how you define it, leadership is about influencing people. Okay, it's a complete work that moves the organization towards meeting its goals. Now, leaders influence followers to do what is best for the organization in terms of meeting organizational goals, which should be based on the values of the organization. But now let's try an experiment. Okay, now take any definition of leadership and replace the word leadership in that definition with any number of organizational terms. So mission, culture, structure, work, etc. And does the definition still work and make sense? So let's try it using the leadership definition by Ralph Stogel, which is up here on the screen. So leadership may be considered as the process of influencing the activities of an organized group and its efforts towards goal setting and goal achievement. So let's replace leadership with organizational culture. So organizational culture may be considered as the process of influencing the activities of an organized group and its efforts towards goal setting and goal achievement. Even if you've never heard the term organizational culture before, based on what it sounds like and based on what just little I told you, does that definition work? Like, does it make sense? Yeah, is it true for organizational life? It's yes, yes, and yes. All right, this tells us there's more to organizations than just leadership. Now, in this process, leadership occurs when followers and leaders interact. And in these interactions, a library leader influences followers, and followers influence library leaders just as much. And these interactions take place within a specific organizational culture that dictates everything about them, from when and where they will take place to how leaders and followers act and behave during the interactions. Culture defines the boundaries for acceptable leadership and followership behavior and limits what a leader can and cannot do. So, when an organizational culture is unhealthy or dysfunctional, then these leader and follower interactions will also be unhealthy and dysfunctional, leading to an organization that not only cannot meet its mission, vision, and goals, but it's one no one wants to work for. And looked at it this way, leadership influences followers who influence leaders, both of whom are influenced by and influence organizational culture. Now, all three are crucial to a library, and it can be difficult to change just one, for any changes to one piece change the other two as well. Okay, followers make meaning a reality by acting on the meaning being created. They do the work of the mission to take the library towards its vision. Now, this action requires interpretation. So sometimes these interpretations are accurate and beneficial, and other times they're inaccurate and hurtful. Now, once in a while, interpretations are intentionally sabotaging. Now, much of leadership is about the actions and perceptions of followers. Whether a leader possesses certain traits, skills, and abilities, and whether that leader is any good as a leader, is determined by the perception of followers. So those perceptions depend on context, culture, situation, and organization. Followers play an enormous part in any organization and are a powerful force. In fact, it may well be that followers teach leadership to leaders. Now, the leadership literature tends to think of followers as inert pieces that are moved by and acted on by leaders. But nothing could be further from the truth. Without the action of followers, an organization will not be able to accomplish even the most basic of goals. Without the approval and buy-in of followers, a leader will never be successful. This is what makes the ability to relate to other people, to communicate with them, to understand them, and to help them move forward towards a future state so important to leadership. Even in the most top-down authoritarian workplaces, leaders who cannot relate to others and build relationships um, are just doomed to failure. Okay, whether through aggressive, passive, or passive-aggressive means, followers will win out. Okay, followers have a lot of power, and it's the job of a leader to help guide the use of that power in ways that help the organization accomplish its mission. The interaction of leaders, followers, and meaning is where leadership takes place. Now, leadership is not how a leader will make an organization better, but how leaders and followers work together for organizational success. It's critical to remember, however, that leaders and followers operate in a unique environment with its own culture and established norms of being and doing. Okay. Now, leaders are not the be all end all when it comes to organizational success and failure, as I just talked about. But you'd be hard pressed to find that and learning that when you read the leadership literature, which it mostly just spotlights the difference leaders and only leaders make. And that almost single minded focus on leadership and organizational life has led to what's called the romance of leadership. Now, this romance is the exaggeration of what leaders can do and the role they play in an organization. The romance of leadership creates the vastly overinflated expectations that followers have of leaders. And these unrealistic expectations of leaders not only contribute to the failure of good leaders, but to fewer qualified people who are willing to become leaders. Um, when we discuss leadership, we must also discuss the romance of leadership. So human beings by nature want to find reasons for outcomes and events. What caused this to happen, for good or bad. And organizations and libraries aren't any different. We tend to look at leadership as the main cause for a successful or unsuccessful organizational outcome. Now, this is known as the romance of leadership. Now, this does several things. It reinforces the importance of leadership. It downplays the role of followers and culture, and creates unrealistic expectations of leaders. So taken together, these three things impede substantive change, they lower morale, and they drive good people out or keep them away altogether from leadership. This romance also establishes an unfair distribution of credit and blame for organizational success and failures. Now, some research shows that leaders receive over 50% of the credit for of excuse me, receive over 50% of the credit and the blame for organizational outcomes, but leaders account for less than 15% of those outcomes. Okay, we're meaning-making creatures. We want to find a reason why a project turned out well or ended poorly so we can replicate the success or fix the problem. But organizations, though, are very complex. Okay, even a small library is composed of many moving parts. You have librarians, library staff, student workers, or volunteers. They're all interacting with faculty, staff, alumni, or community patrons. And all of these individuals bring to these interactions their lives up to that point. So a bad breakfast, a fight with a spouse, a child who's failing algebra, all of these can impact how any one of these individuals interacts with another. And all the work and planning and effort that goes into a typical project and its success or failure can come down to someone's mood at one particular moment in time. And good leaders take responsibility for all that happens in their library, but they also are keenly aware that they're only one piece of the organizational leadership puzzle. So, as you lead, be aware of the effect the romance of leadership is having on you. Okay, you do not need to be perfect. In fact, you cannot be perfect. Okay, you do not need to have all the answers to work on every project. And sometimes, when as leaders we start to feel overwhelmed or down on ourselves, it's because of this romance of leadership. So just detach, take a step back, and think of ways to neutralize this romance of leadership and get back into a positive headspace. As you lead, you also need to be aware of the organizational culture in which you lead. So, how does that culture define leadership? Is that culture healthy or dysfunctional? Is it helping the library move towards its mission and vision? These are crucial questions for a library leader to answer and are important things for you to think about as library leaders. Okay? Now, in order to effectively lead others, we must first be able to effectively lead ourselves. So, in leading yourself, you need to have purpose, focus, and love of the craft. And what it takes to be successful as a leader is the same it takes to be successful really in any other area of your personal work life. You got to have purpose, you got to have focus, you got to have that love of the craft. Now, the how, so the mission, leads to the what, and both are supported by the why, which is your purpose. With a strong enough why, a strong enough purpose, you can reach any what can be reached by various means of how, but it all flows from the why. All three of these parts reinforce, lead to, and support the other two parts. Now, in this portion of the webinar, we will explore leadership purpose, okay, why you are a leader. This purpose is what helps you be an original leader, and originality brings value. Now, your purpose allows you to move and work in a way natural to you and be guided by what is demanded of you. Now, focus is vitally important for any library leader because it's needed in every facet of leadership. You need to be able to focus on the work that's right in front of you, focus on the strategic picture of your library, and finally, we will explore the love of leadership and librarianship, because you can't lead it if you don't love it. And all three of these things form your sort of your essence as a leader and are nurtured by honesty and sincerity. Okay, so let's first talk about purpose. And successful library leaders must possess a strong purpose uh, for leading. Their purpose is the reason why you do the difficult work of leading a library. Okay, purpose also supports a leader on their journey. It acts as the why, helping a leader to carry on when you no longer feel like carrying on. It not only acts as the why of leadership, um, but builds the path to follow as well. So in short, a leadership purpose defines who a leader is. Okay, leadership purpose allows a leader to let go of affectation and also of fear. A purpose is who a leader is. Now, often leaders get caught up in trying not to look foolish or dumb. Leaders want to make good choices and avoid bad choices. But to be truly effective, a leader must move in the way their purpose dictates. A leader should never apologize for or be embarrassed about being who they are as a leader and living their leadership purpose. A purpose also allows you to know if you're working in the right organization and environment for you. Moving against your purpose and acting counter to your values will cause you to be in a chronic state of stress, which will have a terrible effect on your health. And before we even start to talk about, effectiveness as a leader. Working counter to your purpose will also cause you to lower your standards and accept less of yourself and others around you, making you less effective as a leader. Not only does a purpose allow you to know yourself better and make the right choices for yourself, but it also lets others understand you and know what you and your work is about. Okay? By knowing you better, followers can trust you more and work more easily with you. Okay? Before developing a purpose, you have to first, clarify your values. So a good purpose has to be based on values, and every day you must live out your purpose and thereby your values as well. So a leader must not just state a purpose or have a purpose, but you have to embody that purpose. A leader's sense of purpose is what guides, motivates, and informs all decisions. A strong purpose helps a leader from becoming lost in a sea of options and allows a leader to know what they should and should not be doing. So a purpose is both a guide and a support system for you as a leader. So when faced with a plethora of choices, a purpose helps a leader decide which one to follow and which one to choose. Library leaders must make choices that fit within their purpose and must, excuse me, library leaders must make choices that fit within their purpose. Okay, so here's your second activity. What's your leadership purpose? Okay, take some time to think about this. Why do you want to lead? What is your mission as a leader? How does this purpose mesh with your definition? That's really important. And again, we'll come back to the assignments at the end of the webinar, but this is something you can think about and I think is really important and helpful because when you clarify your purpose, you also clarify your values as well. So focus. Now, a focus is essential to being successful in any course of action. Focus can take someone from average to good and good to great. Library leaders, no different. They must minimize distractions, delegate duties, and empower others in order to be focused on the important work of the library. Now, library leaders need to focus on the short and long-term work they need to finish, and also on the big picture of the library. They must focus on not just the tactical, but the strategic dimensions as well. Focus allows library leaders to know what work will take them to their vision, but also what work not to do, which can be even more important. A successful leader must have focus. A leader must minimize distractions and be focused on the day-to-day work of the library in order to oversee projects, track budgets, and complete reports on time. Now, this, of course, is in addition to the myriad of other duties of a library leader, the numerous meetings and developing donors. A library leader needs to have focus on what needs to be accomplished now and what is coming due in the very near future. But a leader must also be focused on the big picture, not just the tactical, but the strategic too. And over the course of the past several months, I'm not sure what kind of libraries y'all are working in, but here at an academic library in the middle of March and spring break, we made this decision. We're going to switch and move all our classes to remote. The library is closed to the public. We had to make this switch to offering remote services and how do we offer access to our collections and this and this and this and that. And it was just all of these things, just kind of what was right in front of me and right in front of the other department heads and associate dean here to do and to complete and to answer these questions. But at some point in time, I said, you know what? We still have all of these big picture items that we have to take care of, these big projects, these strategic vision that we're working towards. And so that I had to remind myself and still have to remind myself, I can't get too mired in these kind of day-to-day weeds and still have to focus on that big picture. And it becomes really tough during a time like this. Okay. Now, so mindfulness, you probably heard this term all over the place. It's really in vogue right now, but it's actually it's an ancient concept that carries a lot of benefits. Now, mindfulness makes for better library leaders It's a form of self-care. It makes us more aware when we're out of balance. It improves self-awareness as well as awareness of others and our environment. And it also greatly improves our focus. So there's all kinds of mindfulness practices that are out there, and I encourage you to look into some if you're interested in this and find some. But here's a really quick and easy one that you can do kind of wherever you are, whenever. So just place your hand on your belly button, okay, and take a deep breath. And this should push your belly and your hand out. You take a deep breath, your chest doesn't expand, your belly does. So take this deep breath, push your belly all the way out as far as you can, and then exhale, but leave the hand where it is. And then take more breaths, let's say 10 breaths, and make sure to touch your belly button to your hand each time. Those are just 10 really deep breaths. And you could do this once, you can do it several times a day on a schedule. You can do it when you feel distracted or upset, or when you need to get into a focused mindset. Let's say before you go in and have one of those difficult conversations you have to have as a leader, or you just got done having one of those difficult conversations and it's upset you and rattled you. This is just something that you can do to help get you into the right state of mind and the right mindset. Okay. Now, focus also requires us to get rid of distractions so we can get a really important work done. And this requires you to know how you spend your time and what gives you the best results. So try making a list of the 10 things you do most often and decide which two gives you the best results. So do those and get rid of the others. Now, first, this is going to be easy. Okay, so things like social media, cat videos, just kind of scrolling on reading the news on Twitter, cat videos. Yeah, I know y'all watch a lot of cat videos. Is okay, but those things are easy. Those are just distractions that don't get me anywhere. Don't do anything. I can get rid of those. But after you do this a few times, it starts to become harder. And what you're going to find is you get more done, and you're better at your job with less distractions and more focus. And what you're going to find too is there's actually going to be some real work that maybe you don't have to do. Maybe you can delegate that to somebody else, and let them take care of that while you focus on those things that are really, really important to you and to the library. Okay. So if you don't love it, you can't lead it. And focus, uh, focus and purpose will only take you so far, right? You also need to take enjoyment in what it is that you do, and take enjoyment in leadership and in librarianship. Library leaders need to inspire and motivate others to get them excited about the work of the library, but they can only do that if they themselves are inspired and motivated and excited. People are going to see right through phoniness. Okay, phony enthusiasm. That's easy to see through, and library leaders, you won't be able to make that connection with the people in your library. So true success for library leaders involves being good at the work and enjoying it as well. This is true for both librarianship and leadership. So no one is born natural at either. Anyone can learn to be good at both. Okay. Why would anyone want to do something they're both good at and enjoy? Or why would you not want to do that? I should say. Being good at leadership and or librarianship is only going to take you so far if you don't enjoy it. And you'll never be able to accomplish those truly outstanding things, because the true nexus of great work is to be both good at it and enjoy it. Okay, so here's another activity for you. What is it that you like about leadership? Okay, so do you like just to boss people around? Okay, I mean, I respect that, but that's probably a bad reason to get into leadership. Do you enjoy the burden and honor of leading and helping others? Okay, another activity for you, right, is think about this. Think about what it is you enjoy about leadership. And I think this actually pairs really well with the purpose that you have as a leader. Okay, now, in order to lead others, library leaders must build relationships and relate to people in the library. You have to model organizational values and behavioral norms and share a mission and vision of the library. Now, library leaders should have a mission first, people always mindset. They must always focus on accomplishing the library mission and vision, moving it towards its goals, while simultaneously taking care of, supporting, and connecting with the people in the organization without whom the library would not be successful. Okay, so library leaders, you have to be able to relate to and work with all varieties of people. Leaders need to make human connections with the people of the library. You need to treat librarians and library staff with respect and allow them to express their thoughts and emotions. Leaders should be approachable, relatable, and well-rounded. Okay, someone people in the library see and relate to as a human being. To be a successful relations leader who's also able to move the library towards its vision, you need to develop a mission first, people always mentality. Okay, this means always focusing on the library being successful, all right, but at the same time, taking care of the people who are in the library. Now, this requires the use of both empathy and compassion. And there are several types of empathy, okay, but its most basic level, empathy means being aware of others' emotions and the emotions of the organization. Compassion means to recognize when people are suffering and act to help them relieve their suffering. So, for a library leader, this can mean recognizing and helping those in the organization who are struggling with their work, they're feeling unheard, or they lack a sense of belonging. It can also mean knowing what someone wants to achieve and supporting them. So, as a leader, you need to understand the people you're leading, their wants, their needs, their goals, and support them at the level they need to be supported. So much of leadership is about guiding and supporting all these desperate people to work towards goals. So these people, of course, also have wants and needs and goals of their own. As a leader, you have to want the best for them in order to get the best from them. You also need to use your awareness to know when your team needs a break. Okay, you can run a car engine in the red for a short time, but you run that engine too long in the red and it's going to blow and it's going to stop working. Your car's going to start running and it's expensive to replace an engine. And so the same holds true for people. And now, as leaders, sometimes we might be able to run longer in the red and on less rest than others, but you can't expect everyone to move at your pace. You have to recognize when those in your library need a break and give it to them. Now, some days as a leader, it might seem like no one is watching you or listening to a single word that you say or read a single email that you write, but they really truly are. Okay, in a study of baboons, the members of the Congress looked up at the alpha baboon every 20 to 30 seconds. Right, that's a lot. And people pay close attention to the attitude, behavior, and work of leaders. This is why library leaders must model the way for library members. Model the way includes several pieces. It's to model good organizational behavior. This means being a model of the norms and values and behaviors of the library's organizational culture. You're expected to be a prototype of the organizational culture. And when a leader drifts too far away from accepted behavior, they're no longer seen as a leader, as one of us. Okay, but as a leader, you can also influence the culture of the library by modeling the types of actions and values you want to see or see more of in the library. As a library leader, you need to be aware of what your behavior and body language and facial expressions and way of dress, what it all says, and what it all means to other people. Okay, and and a lot of this comes down to trust. Trust is difficult to build, and it's easy to lose. Okay, to gain trust, you need to use your self-awareness and self-management, which are two important pieces of emotional intelligence discussed a little bit later, to monitor and control your behavior, your attitude, and communication. You need to be consistent in both your actions, in words, and display. No hypocrisy between the two. I know that's can't be perfect, like I said, but you need to work on and doing the best you can with that. And you need to be able to speak and act both sort of intellectually and emotionally. This allows others in the library to feel your warmth and energy, to know that you care, and to recognize you're human. And as a leader, you're modeling how to interact in the library in ways that create happiness, success, and healthy working relationships, and how to work and move toward this shared future of the library. Okay, so I told you there was a lot of activities. Okay, so here's another one. As you move towards the library goals, okay, think of the values you're modeling in your day-to-day behavior and activity, and also think of the ways you can have a people first, mission always mindset. Okay, and again, we'll come back to these activities at the end. So the following just are some popular take what do these, think about some things that might have, there's theory X and theory Y and theory Z. And in theory X, these were formed in the 1960s by a researcher called David McGregor. In theory X, the idea is that people don't like to work, right? And so people have to be closely monitored in their work, and that people are only extrinsically motivated. So they're only interested in any kind of material rewards. And so managers have to use a carrot and a stick. So in hard theory X, it's a big stick. You don't get this done, you're fired. So in soft theory X, is a little carrot, right? If you get this done, you can leave 15 minutes early, kinds of things. And kind of no surprise that theory X leaders are very top-down and autocratic. Now in theory Y, so people find significance in their work, and they will work up to the standards that are set for them. They're very intrinsically motivated. They want to know that their work has meaning and they have a purpose and they're doing something good and part of something bigger than themselves. And leaders who are theory Y are much more democratic and participative than theory X leaders. Now there's this thing, theory Z, and this came out of the kind of 1980s and looking at organizational culture, but that leaders provide job stability and look after follower well-being. The followers then in turn are loyal. And so, like I said, the foundation of this theory is organizational culture, and it came out of studies of Japanese organizations, like I said, in the 1980s, which typically had people would start in an organization and work there their entire life. So contingency leadership, theory states that not all leaders will make good leaders for all organizations, and a successful leader's style must be the right fit for the organizational context, organizational culture, and the work they're expected to perform. Okay, so again, not all leaders are right for all situations, and leaders are effective at either being task leaders or relations leaders, and very few people are effective at both. And so you have to understand what an organization needs at the time, and because as time changes, an organization changes, they need something different from a leader. And again, culture plays a large role in determining a leadership fit in what a leader needs to do. Situational leadership. So in situational leadership, successful leaders are able to change and adapt their approach to leadership according to a follower's ability and needs. Leaders need to be able to assign and guide work and mentor and develop followers. If you have someone who's a really experienced cataloger, you don't need to sit down and work with them through every single process and step of a project. You can give them a big complex project and let them have at it, let them figure out their own workflow and be there to support them and help them along the way. That's going to be very different than someone who's right out of library school and first job, and it's going to need a lot of guidance. And all of this contingency and situational leadership takes into theory X, theory Y, theory Z, and kind of combines them all and says there isn't one right way to do this. That's always going to depend on the person you're dealing with and the situation that you're in and the organization that you're in at the time. Okay. Leader-member exchange. So this focuses on the relationships a leader builds with individual followers and the subsequent interactions between the leader and follower. The more positive the interactions, the better organizational outcomes are. So in LMX, followers can be divided into an in-group and an out-group based on their relationships with leadership. So in the in-group, the in-group is the group of followers who have formed strong relationships with the leader. Typically, they're people who are looking to become leaders themselves. The out-group hasn't formed as strong a relationship with the leader, and their interactions tend to be very transactional and just, I need this from you, and I'll give you this if you give me that kind of thing as well. Now, transformational leadership is a long a spectrum, and transformational leaders use the 4 I's, which is idealized influence, individualized consideration, um, inspirational motivation, and intellectual stimulation to improve organizational effectiveness and facilitate long-lasting change, create personal relationships, and develop leaders throughout the organization. And like I said, it exists on the spectrum of laissez-faire, or leadership does, from laissez-faire, which is absence of leadership, to transactional leadership, which is very kind of basic management. If you meet these goals, you get this reward, to transformational, which is what I just described through the 4 I's. Now, all three of these are really crucial for leaders to be able to use effectively, including laissez-faire leadership, including knowing when not to actually kind of get into something and maybe just step back and let some other people figure it out for themselves. Okay. The 4 I's I just described, acting as a role model, providing meaning, encouraging creativity, and providing mentoring. Now, these are very pie in the sky. They're very difficult for a lot of people to achieve and to meet. That's why it becomes so difficult sometimes to try to copy and emulate these leadership theories. They're very kind of idealistic, right? And can be, if you use these as a measuring stick, sometimes you can often feel like you're a failure because you're just not living up to these areas. Now, emotional intelligence can be defined as the subset of social intelligence that involves the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions, to discriminate among them, and to use this information to guide one's thinking and actions. And here's a table that kind of lists those. There's 4 areas. It's self-awareness, self-management, it's social awareness, and relationship management. So it's awareness and management of yourself, and awareness and management of others. And it kind of puts them up there. We're a little bit short on time, so I might go through the slide a little too quickly for you to get everything that's up there. But basically understanding who you are, managing your behavior, understanding the other people that are in the organization and be able to relate to them and manage those relationships are really what emotional intelligence and emotionally intelligent leaders do. So authentic leadership, you hear this talked a lot, and it's not a very well defined type of leadership. And if you try to copy certain typologies like transformational leadership or servant leadership, this really kind of hinders the development of being an authentic leader and really being who you are as a leader, because you're trying to fit narrowly within a defined concept that, again, may not be what your strengths are as a leader. Bill George talked about authentic leadership a lot. He's written about it: purpose-driven, value-centered, being compassionate, building relationships, being disciplined, and being very much service-oriented. And I like Daniel Goleman's definition as being the same person to others as you are to yourself, which isn't always the case. Both good and bad. Sometimes we treat others far better than we treat ourselves. Okay, and that's a terrible way to be. Or we act very differently in private than we do in public. So trying to bring all those things to an alignment is what it means to be authentic. So servant leadership, you might hear this talked about a lot, and this came out of the Christian church, where Robert Greenleaf developed this. And the tenets of, you do hear servant leadership used a lot in the corporate world and in other areas, where I should say that the term isn't used a lot, but the idea is there. That's being a servant first, that as a leader you want to serve others, and then making this conscious choice and decision, right? This to serve others helps one to lead and become a servant leader. And so, do those who are served grow as people? Are they likely to become servants? And I think this is really important. Who benefits from you as a servant leader? Is it the least privileged in society? If it is, then that is really who a servant leader. That's who a servant leader is. That they're helping the least privileged in their organization, their society. And again, quickly, so some of the things: a servant leader, you have a vision, create trust, listen, empathize, has a sense for the unknowable, and be able to foresee the unforeseeable. So again, this is one of those things: how in the world are you supposed to know the unknowable or foresee the unforeseeable? If I did that, I could make a fortune in the stock market. But these kind of things, so these are, again, I keep going back to, it's so hard to just copy these kinds of things and try to do them because of things like this. It just becomes so very difficult. All right. But there are some good things that we can pull out and pick out of each of these. So now it's time, we're going to put all this together. Okay, we're going to review your assignments, okay, that'll help you put you on the path of becoming a successful library leader. So what are some things that you need to do? Okay, so first of all, you need to create your own definition of leadership. What does it mean to be, for you to be a successful leader? That's based on your own experiences. It's based on what we talked about here today. Okay, and how are you going to meet this definition? This is really crucial. What kinds of things do you need to do, right, in order for you to be a successful leader according to your definition? If you're going to lead like you define it, what are the things that you need to do in order to be successful? So create your purpose. What's your personal purpose? What's your professional purpose? It's great if they're the same and really align. What's your leadership purpose, right? And all of these are based on your values. So what are your values? What do you value as a professional? What do you value in your personal life? And how can you put all of these together to create a really strong purpose that'll guide you through your professional career and your personal life as well? And then finally, you know, develop a plan, a leadership plan, and put it into practice. Where do you want to be? What do you want to lead? How do you want to do it? And put together steps that are going to get you to that place that you want to be. What's a timeline look like? How are you going to get assessment and feedback of how well you're doing and where you need to improve? You need to build in time for reflection. One great thing to do this, one good way to go about this, is to find somebody who's doing something that you want to do, who's leading. Let's say you want to be a dean of an academic library, an R1 institution. So go out and find those deans at the academic libraries at those R1 institutions and look at their CVs, look at their accomplishments, look at what they did, how they got to where they are, and start to kind of, reverse engineer that and see how you can get there as well. And I think just every day, just what can you do to become a better leader every single day, just to improve your leadership just a little bit, whether it's how you respond to somebody, how well you listen to somebody, and all of those things. And there. So I'm going to end here and just say, studying, reading, writing, and theorizing about leadership will benefit any current and aspiring leader. But until you go out and lead. So by leading, library leaders create their own unique leadership practice. They understand who they are as a leader, what works for them, how they can best approach the difficult and rewarding job of leading a library. So leaders need to go out and lead in order to blaze their own path in the library and leadership world. Leaders also need to set goals to inspire and motivate them, and use their purpose and their mission and vision and their own leadership. Library leaders need to set goals, big goals, okay, on where they want to go and what they want to do. And whether they reach those goals or not, it really isn't important as the type of leader that you become in the pursuit of those goals. Okay. We only have a couple of minutes. I kind of wanted to have some time for question and answer. I don't think we really do. But if you do have any questions, my email is up here on the screen. And also, if you wanted to follow me on Twitter and listen to some stuff that I have to say, and I got some stuff up on my website. Looks like we have a chat question coming in. Could you send us a link to the PowerPoint, a copy? I will do that. I'll get in touch with the webinar coordinators, and I'll send you out a link to that PowerPoint and make sure everybody gets that. Anything else really quick? We only got about a minute or so. I want to be sort of a good steward of your time and to hold you off. And I want to thank you all again for participating in this and listening to me. And I hope that you enjoyed it. And I hope that you learned something. And I hope that this helps you out and you can go off and apply some of this stuff to your leadership life. So thank you very much. And I think with that, we will end the webinar. So thank you. Have a great day.